Hello, fellow UBI champions, and welcome to our monthly UBI4ME community call. You have Marcel,
Oh yeah,
and my name is Daniela. Hello. Today is June the 3rd, and we're here to talk about UBI, what's new in the UBI world, and what it takes for the vast majority of people who think life should be fair for everyone, irrespective of the family they are born into. What does it take for us to change the world so that it actually will happen? Do you want to start off myself, or should I paint a picture of why we're talking about this particular topic today?
no, I think if you start with painting a picture, it'd be great.
Okay, so in a nutshell, before this call, we have been talking about what's been new for UBI. And just to recap quickly, UBI is short for Universal Basic Income. What this means is that every single person would receive a regular monthly income to support the basic needs. So, what you do with the money is up to you. There are no restrictions. There are no qualifying conditions or anything. That's the unconditional or universal income that every single person, including children, would receive. It would replace some of the current charity or incentive schemes, such as a pensions, for example. It could do a lot towards that or unemployment money and so on. It would not replace everything in terms of supporting those that have additional needs. So we do understand that some people need a little bit of extra help and care, and we recognize that. So universal basic income really is the basic income floor that everyone should receive in order to cover basic needs. Full stop. And the conversation we had prior to the call was around the topic of, isn't it easy if you're born into a middle class or higher income bracket family? You're the only child in a family. Maybe your father and your mother, or whoever is bringing you up, maybe all of those people were individual children as well, in comparison to being born into a family of five children. So if you have one child, you can pour all your money, time, and effort into that one child. If you have five, and five is possibly a bit more than it is common in many countries at the moment, but say three. Three is still a good number of children to have. So if you have two or three children, then automatically your time, resources, and money would be split between them. And what does that mean? Well, on a practical level, it means that maybe you can't go to Harvard anymore if that ever was part of your plan, or you can't go to other world-class university. Maybe it has to be the local college, something like that. And that will set you up for a completely different trajectory in life. And that simply comes down to how many children your parents chose to have. Personally, I don't want to tell people how many children to have. Personally, I never wanted any because I think the idea of having a human being growing inside of me sounds a little bit too much like the movie Alien, and it's not for me. I have met people who want more children. Good on them. Let them have them. I've met children who wanted, I've met people, adults, who wanted to have just one child to try it out and see what it's like. And good on them. Everyone has a different life plan, and everyone should pursue the dreams and hopes and what makes them happy. But all of them should have enough to eat, in my opinion. All of them should have enough money to be dressed, and it doesn't need to be fancy designer clothing, but just be dressed and warm enough to make it through winter time. And all of them, in my opinion, should have enough money to have a roof over their head. That's as simple as that. And that is what the UBI, the Universal Basic Income, would allow every single person to do.
I think that's a key point. Is that we're already playing the lottery of life. You're either born to rich parents or not. You're either born a single child or one of many, and that has a huge impact on your future. I mean, the success the chance of you being successful, what's commonly called successful, has a big dependency on who your parents are. And it's a lottery. And I don't think we should then extend that lottery system just to survival, just to your chances of um, feeding yourself or being in a perpetual job that you hate and you can't quit. You can't decide that you want to look for something else just because you can't afford to miss a day's work because you don't have the money. You don't earn enough to be able to save anything to be able to um, look for another job. People don't have those opportunities. And I think that's what we want with the UBI, is just to give people the opportunity, right, to look for another job if they want, to try, contribute to society in a way that doesn't need to be monetized. I've been reading recently about care, people who care for others, right, being paid the least. And these people who, if they get paid at all, you get basically, you talked about people bringing up children in the world wanting to be parents. When you get somebody sacrificing their careers to be a parent, and let's be honest, it's mostly the woman who end up being the one that sacrificed their career for being a parent. Um, that shouldn't be the case. People should be able to choose to bring up children if they want, choose to try something, etc. Just the way rich people do. Rich people don't have to worry about money. They don't have to worry about whether they get fired or keep a job, or where the food's going to come from, whether they'll have a roof over their head next week if they can afford the rent or not. And I think that's where we're coming from. There's already enough of a lottery in life without putting the extra burden on insisting that people stay in their current job just so they can survive.
I completely agree, especially on the topic of bringing up children. As you can imagine, I've come across of a lot of women of similar age who either decided to have children or not. And I still find it very, very sad that some women say, I'd love to have a child, but I can't because I will never be able to re enter the workforce anymore. So I can't have children because I can't take the time out. It's heartbreaking.
And I think it's almost a separate issue. It's heartbreaking because we discriminate against women who have taken time out to raise a family, and again, it's always the woman that seem to be the ones that are making that sacrifice. But as you said earlier, if countries are worried about birth rates, which seems to be the case at the moment, that we have this declining birth rate, and
Yes,
if you give each child a UBI as well, then
yes.
you basically get more money to bring up children, so that you don't have to worry about whether you're choosing to have one child or three, whether that one child is going to get the benefits of all your resources or not, because each child gets its own UBI. So if you choose to have more children, those children are not discriminated against just because your parents decide to have another child. And I think we forget about those little things.
Yes, I completely agree. As I said, I find it so sad that people don't look at the flip side of things, because a lot of times UBI is being talked about as for poor people, as if it's a charity handout, and it isn't. It literally isn't. It is there to create a society that's a little bit fairer, because just as I think it's sad for women not being able to have the children, because let's be honest, it's women who birth the children, who carry them to term at this point in time. But I've also come across men who would love to stay at home with the children, but they can't because the legal situation, which means who gets the money when the child is a baby, when it needs nurturing. And in many countries, unfairly, it goes to the woman rather than to whichever parent wants to stay at home. And again, a UBI could be such that both parents could potentially stay at home for a little while if that's what they chose to do. And there are lots of fathers out there as well. And also lots of people who don't quite fit the gender norms or the gender stereotypes. We're currently in Pride Month. I just want to work that in somehow because it's really, really important to me to get the word out that not everyone is a cisgendered person. Not everyone thinks that there are two genders and I'm either one or the other. And depending on whether left or right, I have to perform a certain way because, in my personal opinion, this view is way too narrow. It's just like the view that there is either rich and poor and there's nothing in between. Because ultimately, rich and poor is the way of feudalism. Back in the Middle Ages, when there were either the kings and nobility and everyone else was a peasant. It's the same us and them thinking that I think currently we're a little bit too much into. It's rich and poor, it's us and them. And I believe that the UBI would help move away from that. That's my kind of thinking. And another interesting thought that was thrown out today, not by me, but Marcel thought of that is, well, how about we have a championship or world championship, if you like? The richest person on the planet will be will be nominated the richest person of the planet, and at the end of the year, that person will be taxed 100%, meaning the personal wealth will disappear, will go into the coffers of the UBI regulatory, and thereby it would be spread out, for example. How would that change the world?
It's a thought experiment.
It's
I
a
don't
thought
think it's
experiment.
the approach, but I think it's a thought experiment as to, if we didn't praise, the richest people for being the richest people, but instead, there was a system where the richest person became the poorest person at the end of the
Mhm.
year. That would change the way people viewed the world. And you just very quickly see rich people trying to give away their money just to be the second richest person in the world, not to be the one that loses everything. But no, it's just a thought experiment, and it comes back to all of these. If you were to play the lottery of life, where if you were to draw a ticket randomly and decide on a system, that would benefit you before you drew that lottery, what system would you have? And would you decide that there'd be a rich few and everybody else would be poor? Or would you have a more egalitarian system? And I think most people, I hope anyway, I think most people would want to have a more egalitarian system. And our system is a choice. We have chosen to have this system, and we can choose to change it going forward. We just need enough people to view it as a choice, to view it as a possibility. And I think UBI is a step in that direction. I've said this before. I don't think UBI is the ultimate goal, but it is a step in the direction. It gives people the freedom to, to choose whether to stay in the job that they don't like or not, but also the freedom to do things to contribute to society in different ways. And even if that's to stop and think about things, how could life be better? If they want to become a politician, they can choose to become a politician. They don't have to have rich people and rich connections to be able to get them the funding that they need, to be able to win elections. We see it in the US all the time. Millions. You have to be able to gather millions, right, to win an election. And it's just ridiculous because it just means that poor people which don't have the connections can't do it. Despite all the limitations on how much an individual can contribute to a campaign, they have these super PACs that bypass these systems, and it's just crazy. It's all about who has the money, who has the most money, and those people perpetuate their ruling classes.
Mhm. Now, for everyone who is listening out there, first of all, join us next month. Um, but one word that you've mentioned sticks out in my head just to talk about for a moment. You mentioned egalitarian, and now you're talking about ruling classes and so on. So, talking about egalitarian, it does not mean that we all have the same haircuts, we all have the same clothing, and there is only one type of couch or one type of lunch menu or something like that. It does not mean that we all have the same. What it
No, I think
simply means is that we have access to the same opportunities. So if your talent and your inclination is to be a mathematician, go and do it. Go study it, do it to your heart's content. If you want to be a hairdresser, do that. If you want to be a banker, do that. If you want to be a builder, do that. If you want to be a dog coiffeur, please do. There are plenty of pooches out there who need you. That's what it means, that everyone has the opportunity to do what as pleases them. And again, we're talking about a universal basic income. It is not that everyone is going to be driving a Porsche or a Lambo or something like that. No, it simply means that everyone has what they need to live a dignified life and to pursue something that interests them. And the reason why I don't want to go into more details of what something is because there are so many different interests out there. The field of science is so vast, and that's just academia. As I mentioned, I have a friend who loves cooking and coming up with new recipes. Awesome. I have another friend who loves cooking, but not making new recipes. It's like feeding the crowds, feeding people, seeing the joy on people's faces as they're enjoying the food. So even though both of them fall under cooking technically, it's a completely different area. And life is just so full of opportunities that I can't even imagine. And maybe you can't either. And that's all it is. Having equal opportunity to find out what we really want and love, and then pursue that so that we make ourselves happy and also in the process make other people happy. And I'm guessing that in the long run with it, the world and people will be better off.
And I think the key message as well is that all of this, we keep talking about what you would do, and all of these things would be contributions. You would still be contributing to the society and to the world as a whole. You just wouldn't be stuck in a job that you hate. You'd be able to write recipe books, right? And there'd be a lot more recipe books out there. You'd be able to cook food for people, and provide free food for everyone. What fantastic outcome that would be. These people are contributing. They're not sitting at home, getting drunk or doing drugs like people keep accusing them. And I think there was a recent article as well, which just said, of all the experiments, the UBI experiments that have been done, so pilots that have been done, not one of them has shown that people work less. Not one. There hasn't been a single example that people who receive a UBI choose to work less. They all either find a new job or find something else to do and move forward. You going to say something?
Yes, because I just need to put that into context here, because this is one big headline that suggests that one study found that people work less and spend more time as leisure time. Now, that headline was written by a right wing media outlet, and it has been quoted as it is that people work less. But when you actually look at the study, what it meant was that people, instead of working 60, 70, 80 hours a week, they may be working 40, 50 hours, which is still a lot. And the rest of the time they would spend looking after the children, looking after their elderly parents, or they are involved in the community. So the leisure time that was talked about is quite often centered on a sports group, a community group, or something like that. So those people, they don't just sit around and do nothing. They may have done that because after working 80 hours a week for a very long time, you may need a little bit of a break, and good on you. But
Yeah.
generally, that time was then reinvested into something that is good for them. And a lot of people went to study, actually. Sorry, pointing that out as well. So they dialed back work in order to look after other people or look after themselves with studying or looking after themselves and other people at the same time by doing something in the community. So just putting that into context for all of
Yeah,
those out
exactly.
there.
Sorry, it's the yes, they may not do the job that they used to do for 80 hours a week, but they're still contributing
Yes.
with their time. And that could, and it's something I alluded to early on, is the people
Mhm.
that care for others. Just because you're caring for, the elderly or children or whoever, it doesn't mean that you're not working. Just because you
Mhm.
don't get paid for what you do doesn't mean you're not working. And I think that's the key message, is that people will be doing, contributing to society. That doesn't mean they're getting paid for it.
Mhm.
And I think that's the difference going forward.
Yes.
They don't have to get money from what they do. They can do and contribute to society whichever way they choose.
Yes. And again, the headlines and the studies, I urge everyone who is listening, I urge you, read the studies yourself. Don't be fooled by the headlines that some of the biased media puts out there. And when I say biased media, just media in general, read the studies yourself. Don't rely on articles. Don't rely on us. Do go and check things out. Look for yourself. I highly recommend you do that because it will make your life a better life as well. Just knowing the facts rather than going for people, and then including myself, what people tell you. Do check everything out. Make sure you understand what actually was being found.
Yeah. And I think, again, it's also, if you ask yourself, what would you do? What would you be like, if you had a UBI, right? And then why do you think other people behave differently? I think that's an us and them that you brought up earlier problem. You think they are going to behave differently. I wouldn't behave that way, but they would. And I think that's a problem that we need to get past as well.
Hmm. And then one additional topic that I just want to highlight, or I want to quickly bring up is I had one of those 80-hour a week jobs.
Yes.
And when I stopped, yes, I did need a break. I didn't know I needed a break. I thought, oh, I'll just start into my own endeavors. And then I found, no, actually, I did need a break. And it took me a while to find out what I want to do and to find the energy again to actually start it and do it and get a plan in place. And that's okay. That's perfectly fine. I've since even before then, I also met people who told me, oh, they needed a timeout, a few weeks, a few months, and a few cases said a few years. And I was too young and innocent and not worked to the bone at that point to really understand it. But yes, after working way too many hours a week, making other people rich, quite often you need a break. You just need to reset. You need to breathe, just to let go, breathe, possibly sit in the sun for a little bit, whatever it takes for you to recenter and get back to your life, and start again basically. And that's okay. It will happen that some people just sit at home, and that's good for them. And again, what's good for the individual surely is good for society and for the bigger mankind. And that's why, let them, if somebody needs a break, give them a break. They will come back in their own time.
Yeah.
And and sometimes that's just all it takes.
Yeah.
And I have a judgmental side of me, and I'm going to let you all in on that now. There's this one person I can think of who who I generally and often describe as a waste of space. And he has been on unemployment money most of his life, and you can tell I don't have positive feelings towards that person. But that person wants to be a butcher, and not just all of what's involved in cutting up an animal and then cooking it, but very specifically that person wants to make smoked meats. I've eaten some of those smoked meats, bacon to some people, and it's one of the best I've ever had. That's this person's dream. And if only he was allowed to do that full time, trust me, the whole world would be in a better state because his smoked meats are just so good.
Yeah, it's one of the problems with unemployment benefits. If you're seen to be doing
Mhm.
anything, right, you lose your unemployment
Mhm.
benefit. That's one thing with UBI, is that it's not dependent on what you do with your time. You get it anyway. So if you decide you want to make smoked meats, then you don't lose your unemployment benefit. You don't lose your UBI. Right? If you decide to make smoked meats for an hour a day or 40 hours a week, it doesn't matter, right? You still get your UBI. And I think that makes a huge difference as well. When you see people being on unemployment all the time, it's incredibly hard. It's hard work to continually not be doing anything, to
Mhm.
continually receive your unemployment benefit. Because if you were seen to be making any money from making your smoked meats, then you lose your unemployment benefit. And if you can't make enough money from your smoked meats, right, to make as much money as you get from unemployment, then why would you? It's this incentive to work when you receive an unemployment benefit. And I think that's one of the biggest benefits of UBI. So you get it regardless, right? Now you can go and choose what you want to do with your time.
Yes. If you're vegetarian, you may not be able to relate, but everyone else out there. But yes, universal basic income, mathematically, it is workable. Realistically, it is possible. And in my opinion, society would be so much better off if everyone could pursue whatever the fancy or where the fancy leads them. Because smoked meats, again, not my thing. It's not something I'm going to pursue. I like eating it on occasion. Um, and I know where to go if I really, really want the best I can get. And as said, that reason alone is UBI. Bring it on. It helps everyone.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I don't really have anything else for today.
No, I think it's a big topic, and affordability, as you just mentioned, is another big topic. But I think that's all for another day. I think I think the message today is about just giving people opportunity, regardless of the lottery of life that we all have to play anyway. Just give people opportunity to do what they want to do. Contribute the way they want to contribute. And I think that's a good message for today.
Exactly. Good. Then I suggest we close it here. Thanks a lot, Marcel.
Yeah,
Everyone else out there, you're more than welcome to join us on the first Tuesday of the month. So next time will be in July, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, UTC. That is the universal time zone. So please check for your local time zone and join us via Jitsi. You don't have to log in. You can provide another person's name if you like. You don't have to put your camera on if you don't want to. You can send in questions or comments in advance, and we will either read them out if you're not here, or you can ask them, or you can contribute yourself if you like. And with that, I say goodbye and have a good rest of the week.
bye.
Bye.